Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. My name is Ronsley, and this is episode 63 of my AI love affair, and this is the final part 3 of my conversation with Daniel Priestley. I'm here in Dubai, and by the way, Daniel and I are doing a session here or an event here in Dubai tomorrow at the Capital Club, which I'm really excited about, and I'm really excited to see how it goes. But in today's episode, we're talking about the evolution of digital soil, understanding how digital soil has evolved and how it is crucial that we understand that there's a shift from relying on natural intelligence to the emerging dominance of artificial intelligence. We talk about societal inequality in the age of AI and why that is something that we should all consider, the ethical framework for AI and data ownership, and we also talk about preparing the future generations for the AI era. So if you don't know, Daniel Priestley is a legend in the entrepreneur space. In fact, he is someone that I credit a lot of my success over the last 13 years to, because I did the Key Person of Influence program. If you haven't read his books, he's the author of multiple best-selling books. I recommend the Key Person of Influence, The Entrepreneur Revolution, 24 Assets. He is a legend. I love the way he thinks, and I definitely think that you should check it out. Come, let's learn.
Hey, it's Ronsley. Welcome, you AI geek, to this podcast, my AI love affair. Consider this podcast your digital compass, guiding you through the labyrinth that is business growth using artificial intelligence. Running a business as a creative can sometimes be like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube blindfolded. But what if you had a secret tool that could align all the colors for you? That is AI. It's like a master key unlocking multiple doors. Thanks for being here. Let's learn.
So basically, creators are going to inherit the planet, or the geeks are going to inherit the planet. Is that the way you see it?
This is not a new idea. I want you to think about something pretty radical, that for 10,000 years of human history, we lived with automation. We lived with a radical form of automation. And this automation, we didn't know how it worked, but you could just simply put a tiny prompt into this automative device and out would come an amazing amount of value. And it's called soil. It's land. So for 10,000 years, what did we do? We called it God, and we just simply plant a seed and out comes fruit 9 months later. And we have no idea how the hell that happens. So essentially, humans lived near automation, and our value creation systems were essentially soil. So this artificial intelligence, or this natural intelligence, was doing most of the work for us, and we just had to sit back and wait for it to happen. Now, if we look at what's happening now, we're moving into a world with digital soil, and the digital soil requires you to plant a small seed and out comes a lot of fruit. Small seed, lots of fruit. And humans don't even need to know how it works. It's just artificial intelligence, but we plant a seed and out comes the fruit. Now, here's the quick question. How did society organize itself when most of the value was automated? We actually organized ourselves into a feudal system with kings, queens, emperors, and we had a very, very unequal society. We had people who were up here and people who were down here, and there was no ladder in between. Now, what I'm worried about when I'm concerned about this is that the similarities are so similar. Like the digital soil versus the soil, these are exactly the same scenarios, that essentially we're going to end up with kings and queens, King Mark Zuckerberg and King Larry and Sergey and King Jeff Bezos. And we're going to have their inner circles who are the rulers, and they own the digital land and they own the digital soil. That's how we organize society up until very recently. Only the last 150 or 200 years have been different to that.
Is that because we've commoditized industry and we've commoditized information because of the information and industrial age, and now we're commoditizing intelligence? Is that the reason for the 150 years becoming kind of equal? That's my first question. And the second is there an ethical framework that we can wrap around this to avoid a situation where there's this big 95-5 gap?
So We deliberately created a middle class. It wasn't accidental. The conditions were right and we seized on the moment and we created a middle class. So we actually engineered it deliberately. And we're going to have to engineer it deliberately again because the market conditions are going to be pulling towards an unequal society. The default of a highly automated society is kings and queens and serfs and plebs. So that is the very unequal society. That's the default that happens when you have huge levels of automation. The designed or engineered society is where you say, we want a middle class. Now, mind you, what we're describing is we're going to need a whole new economy. We're going to need to have new economic principles and rules. There are massive things that are about to change. The positive changes is that every human being on the planet is going to have access to an amazing doctor called AI. Every human's going to have access to architects, engineers, coders, an incredible school teacher. Every student will have an amazing school teacher called AI. So we're going to lift viability of the bottom 1 to 2 billion people through healthcare and education. There's going to be a boom in healthcare and education for humans, especially at the bottom 2 billion. But the new rules of engagement, the new rules of the economy are going to be very different when we start looking at the more middle and the top. Right? So there's definitely a net positive for the bottom. The middle and the top, the very, very top are going to get like crazy, super fast. They're going to take off. And then the middle is going to, unless we design for the middle to be looked after, the middle's going to be probably decimated.
Tell me more about this. We created a middle class because that, I mean, it's not a statement you hear a lot. And can you explain what that means?
Yeah, well, there was a period of time where the people who had the banking system and the people who had the military industrial complex and the people who had like post World War II, there was literally an engineering of society to say what we want is every single person can buy a home, attend a school, have healthcare, and we're going to design a path for people. And the path is going to be that you get educated, you get a job, you buy a house, you have a retirement plan in place. You can stop working at 55, 60, 65. And there was a plan in place. And the banking system organized around it. The schooling system started organizing around it. The working class, the industrialists, everyone got together and said, hey, this would be a lot better than having pitchforks coming after us. So let's get together and actually create this thing.
Okay, so I want to discuss this because it's been something that I've been thinking about a lot in terms of an ethical framework around artificial intelligence. And I feel like when I'm talking about the ancient wisdom in Australia, Americas, Indias, Africas, where colonialists came and kind of destroyed this whole idea of collaboration in a sense and said, your ways of thinking are uncivilized. Here, let's go to school and teach you the first world way of thinking. And I feel like that needs to be recapped for artificial intelligence to be more collaborative in nature, because right now it's getting data from the people who have captured history, which were the people in power. Is that, am I missing something from that idea? And the way because you would definitely kind of call me out if it is a one-sided way of thinking. So if you have anything to add to that or a different perspective, I would love to hear it.
I probably have a different perspective. The way that I think about an ethical framework is if a nation is sitting on top of huge amounts of natural resource like oil or minerals or gold or any of those sorts of things or any other natural resource, then the question becomes, well, who owns the resource? Like, and who benefits from it? Now, I'm all for innovation, entrepreneurship, and all of that sort of stuff. But there are certain things like the family silver that you can't just sit there and say, oh, I get to sell the family silver once and I keep the benefit of the family silver. Thank you very much. In my mind, if I was Prime Minister of Australia, like one of the first things that I would do would set up a task force to dismantle that structure and set up a sovereign wealth fund instead. So in my mind, there are certain resources that are commons resources. They're for the future generations. So here's the new idea in my mind around ethical framework is that the very nature of what makes AI tick is a common use of data and inputs. There is a massive amount of input that has gone into creating these large language models that everyone contributed to, right? It read everyone's emails, it read everyone's tweets, it read everyone's stuff. So all of this stuff that is out there is a common resource that made this AI thing possible. So in my mind, the ethical framework that we need to be thinking about is sovereign wealth funds that own the AI. So AI is owned by sovereign wealth funds, and that those sovereign wealth funds. So when AI is decimating industries, it's still generating wealth, but who owns that wealth? Well, it's owned by the sovereign wealth fund, which uses that wealth to pay for healthcare, schooling systems, upgrades. So it's essentially using it for the good of citizens and all of that. So the framework we need to think about at the moment is, if all of this sits on top of data and all of that data is a shared data that we all put in to the system, then ultimately we must make a decision to implement like a sovereign wealth fund structure where these companies are effectively owned by sovereign wealth funds.
Yeah, rather than just one person. I love the way you think. And by the way, because of you, and I think of this all the time when someone asks me about the definition of entrepreneurship, and it is business that solves meaningful problems. And I've thought of that ever since I've heard you say that for the first time. It was like just such an easy way to think about this. And I want to land this plane because I'm very mindful of your time. At the start, we spoke about kids and we spoke about what do the kids of the future start to learn? What are the skills that we start to teach them as a result of this change, this drastic change? Industrial revolution came, it created all these machines. As a result, we had information age, it created all this information. Now we have intelligence age, it's got commoditized intelligence. How do we prepare the children for the future?
Okay, so this idea will feel familiar and foreign at the same time. And it's the idea of the distinction between vitality and functionality. So, vitality is the irreplaceable life force, right? Something that's vital is irreplaceable. You need one. So, humans are born as vital creatures where we are the irreplaceable life force. And these little beings come into life full of life, right? Beaming with life. And they have zero functionality. And what happens is we trade vitality for functionality. So, what we do is we trade in our irreplaceable life force to become component labor. So, the schooling system is a process of moving someone from being highly vital to highly functional. So you start out as a 4-year-old and you're full of beans and you're just skipping around, having a good time. Nothing really matters. And then you come out the other end at age 18 and you got none of that energy left, but you've got skills. So that was an appropriate thing to do in the industrial age because we needed component labor. We had these big machines called businesses and factories, and they needed replaceable parts. They had to have lots of parts that could be replaced. And one of those parts was labor. So we had to be able to say, I can take one accountant out and put another accountant in and nothing changes. So the functionality, they can all perform the function that they're designed for. So the world that we're moving into is a world where anything that is functional will probably be done for us, which means that we have to get back to preserving vitality and doing more with vitality. What happens if a child is brought up where functionality is not the backdrop of their existence? The parent's job is to constantly guide the child towards functionality, that you've got to be skillful, you've got to be functional, you've got to be good at something, or else you might die. And then in the world that we're heading towards, like everything in society is running on all the functional stuff happens. The food just arrives, you order it and it arrives. You don't even have to order it. Like all the infrastructure just kind of happens, and there's actually not that many people who are required for all the functional stuff. So then the question is like vitality. So one of the studies that I wish we would do, and I think we should do soon, we need to study trust fund kids. We need to go and have a look at children who were born into crazy rich families who never had to worry about working. From the day they were born, the rest of their life was taken care of. And in most cases, they end up miserable and depressed and they kind of waste their existence. But in certain cases, they end up doing really great things. They put on conferences and concerts. They bring people together and convene around important conversations. They create works of art. They start businesses. They back ideas. And actually, their existence feels very meaningful based on certain parameters. We need to know those parameters, right? Because those parameters are going to have to start applying to everyone. In a post AI world, we are all trust fund kids. So all of us are going to have to sit there and say, we've been born into a multi-billion-dollar family, don't have to worry about working ever again. What do we do? Like, how does existence work? That's going to be a big shift.
Wow. Dan, as always, this is just a huge slice of heaven for me because it has given me so much of perspective. I love how you break things up. Vitality and functionality just blew my mind. Thank you so much for the time, for the way you think, and for my career. I have to thank you for that. And it's been so cool. Thank you.
Like, amazing. Thank you.
Hey, AI Geek. Thanks for listening. Your job doesn't stop here. I want you to lend your voice to the conversation. So you can join those conversations, discussions, new trainings, new recordings, and the rest of the AI Geeks by going to aigeeks.co/Discord. Also, share this podcast with a friend, another potential AI Geek. Until then, much love.